Welcome to our WWIN workshop. Today we're going to be talking all things money and finance, which is super exciting, and we have some incredible guest speakers here to share their knowledge and insights, and will be available for some questions after. So please join. We'll go ahead and get started.
All right. Hi, guys. Welcome. Everyone come sit down, get close and comfortable. My name is Syama Meagher. I am the CEO of Scaling Retail, and I'm so excited to be joined by two very intelligent people here on the topic of finance and mitigating risk. Now, mitigating risk is something that I think we've all just been inundated with over the last few years, and certainly throughout the careers of having businesses and brands. I mean, it is very challenging to understand how to finance your business, how to grow your business, what are the right times and opportunities to seek out the support of a factor, how do you start to work with different retailers on negotiating terms and understanding really how to propel our businesses to growth. Now, I'm joined here today by two very interesting guests, and what I think is so impactful about their experiences is that this is not their first time around the block. In fact, both of these guys have been in the industry for quite some time. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic, but Roseann, please introduce us to Clara Sunwoo. Please tell us a little bit about your background in this industry, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. So my name is Roseann Sunwoo. The brand I designed, it's a mother-daughter team, Clara Sunwoo. We've been in business for over 25 years. And we are a brand that is made in the USA. There are a few of us left. We were on Oprah's favorite list this year. So if you're not familiar with the brand, please come check us out at booth 1524. I've been in the industry for quite a while. And I'm really excited to be here and share some of my knowledge with everyone. And, you know, we're a patchwork where everyone's kind of interconnected in the fashion industry. So just glad to be here.
Thanks, Roseann. And Tim, our darling Tim, who's here to help all businesses grow. Tim, please tell us a little bit about Hilldun and a little bit about what you're doing here today.
Sure. Yes, I'm Tim Moore, and I'm the Executive Vice President at Hilldun, and I've been there for a long time, over 20, almost 25 years now. And I meet with all kinds of fashion brands. And what I really do is I sit down with them and I try to figure out what they actually need, and I give them all their financing options, whether it be something directly with Hilldun is great, or what options they have out in the finance world. And I sit down and really understand their business from soup to nuts and where their cash flow needs come in, where they can eliminate some risk, where they have risk issues, especially with retail stores these days. It's a interesting environment with retail stores going through a COVID period, coming out of it. Many came out very strong, some came out limping. It's interesting, but that's what I do all day long. So I'd like to share what I do with you. So.
Thanks, Jim. And just so everyone knows, excuse me, who I am and what I'm doing here. I run a company called Scaling Retail, where I scale up direct-to-consumer and wholesale businesses, which is very exciting. Back in 2014, I was actually one of the co-founders of a retail store that opened up with one of the first Bitcoin ATM machines in New York City. So everyone at that time was like, what the hell are you doing? But I like to be ahead of the curve, which is why I'm so happy to be here today with these guys. So let's go ahead and open up the conversation with respect to financing. Now, Roseann, when it comes to really the growth of this business, and you've been really a part of this for quite some time, can you give us a little bit of backstory of kind of the financial journey and really how you've made some very strategic decisions around when and how, right, to be drawing on resources, who those partners were, and ultimately how you've been able to grow your business today?
So when you're starting a business, so 25 years ago, you obviously tight on funds, you don't have a lot of clients, there's a lot of risk. The way I started was we did take very small loans from banks, which were difficult to obtain. There were some family loans, different, friends. I mean, really just piecing things together when you begin your business. I was young. But I'm also a risk taker, and I think every entrepreneur has to be a risk taker. Otherwise, you're never going to jump over to the other side of the fence. And when you do, I also believe that with the tight budget that you have to be smart about it, and you have to know when to spend, when not to spend. You also have to wear many hats, is how I started. So when people ask me, what is your role today? Yes, I am the founder and I am a CEO of my brand, but I am also very familiar with, what I was marketing, sales, logistics, packaging. You have to be familiar with all of it. And I think that's what an entrepreneur does. And with the monetary, the funds that I've had, it was building little by little. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs sometimes they get really excited and they feel like I need to hire this person to do this and that, and then they're just going overboard, and the next thing you know, they're going negative. I think that was basically the beginning of my years. You pay your loans back little by little, but I never overspent. Even when I had some nice orders come in, sometimes you want to sort of take a big bite at the apple, but I was careful enough to not put myself in a hole, because sometimes you can't dig yourself out and you don't want to go there. But you do want to dig a little bit, because you still as a business person, you're still trying to grow, and you can't grow if you're so safe. So, and there are things that work, there are things that don't work, and along the way you learn. Through the years, we grew clientele. I've had some great, wonderful retailers like yourselves, who are very experienced when I first started, really believe in my line. And, they also grew with me. They might have started with 5 styles. Now they have a whole section, and they built a whole section for Clara Sunwoo. And it took, listen, this is 25 years of work. So it doesn't happen overnight. And I think along the way I've used Hilldun Factors, and they've helped me with, expanding my business, being able to ship all of my goods, being able to trust, that once I ship it, I will get paid, which is really important because you need your cash flow. And today we have about 2,000 specialty stores that are active. We are a very specialty-driven brand, and what was wonderful is even throughout the pandemic, there was a point where you get a little nervous, and it's like you're just wondering, all the stores were being shut down for a while. But I was able to really rely on these wonderful retailers who also relied on us, and we had this relationship, and that's the key word. You need good relationships. You need to do the right thing. For 25 years, we did the right thing. We would always be upfront, honest about everything. We delivered the goods. We had amazing customer service. And when it came to, a point where the stores were shut down and they had trouble with their cash flow, they would tell me, I'm going to need a little bit of time, but I'm going to pay my bill. And I would go to my vendors as well, my mills and the fabric companies and all of that. And I had a great relationship with them. And it comes in a big circle where they were helping me out. Retailers were paying their bills a little slower than normal, but we're still alive, we're here, and the brand is as strong as ever. But you got to do the right thing.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Roseann. So in terms of doing the right thing, which I think is such a wonderful thing to say, but harder to do in practice. A lot of times I think when you're starting a business, especially these days, entrepreneurialism is over-glamorized, right? And everyone's just trying to rush to get things off the ground, and they're trying to figure out how to leverage credit and how to, get themselves into these very tenuous positions sometimes. And I think this idea of slow growth, right? Incremental growth is very valuable. And I think that requires a lot of patience. And not everyone has that patience. And so in that journey of, progressing, developing relationships, kind of getting yourself ready to the point of maybe working with someone like Tim and getting to the point of working with the Factor, can you tell me a little bit about when you had that aha moment and you were like, okay, now it's time to go beyond these loans. I'm ready to develop these other kinds of financial instrument relationships, which can be scary, especially when you're just getting started and trying to figure out the right thing. So what was the thought process, and how could someone today say, okay, I'm ready to do this in a way that's very thoughtful?
So I think when it comes to working with, for me, to seek out Hilldun factors or any factor, and sort of mitigating the risk. And I learned the hard way, which is in the beginning when I didn't have the factor. You're shipping out, and there's all sorts of payment terms that buyers are requesting, whether it be COD, some are paying by credit card, some of them wanted to prepay, some of them wanted house accounts where you're taking all the risk. All of a sudden, I became the insurance company, right? So at first that was working until you don't get paid, until you're at a point where you thought, something happens, and you realize, wait a minute, this great retailer who I had a great relationship with is not paying their invoices. They have all my merchandise. I need to work forward for the next season. And when you're getting started, this is really scary because it could really hurt you. And one of the things I learned quickly is when that happened to me, the very first time it happened to me, I realized I don't want to be in insurance. I do not want to pick and choose which retailer I give credit to and which I don't. I don't think that should be any entrepreneur's role, to be honest. If you're a solid business and you want to go to bed at night and you don't want to worry about these things, you have to use a bank or a factor that's going to insure these invoices, because at the end of the day, you need to focus on the business and not on collecting, right? You're not the collection agency. And Hilldun really helped me in the beginning because I was able to focus on doing what I do best. If I had large orders come to me, whether it be, from boutiques all the way through, chain stores, I wasn't nervous. And I think that you really, that small percentage that you're paying, I think a lot of manufacturers and retailers, they'll come to me and say, well, why would I need that? I can just, they're good people, they're going to pay the bill. And I said, well, it's going to, once it bites you, you're going to realize what happens. I don't think you can judge, and they could be the greatest, but listen, when people are in financially tight situations, the best people are not going to pay their bills at times, and it happens. Especially during the pandemic, we see a lot more of that. And I think I was able to sleep at night. Hilldun was insuring all of my invoices. If there were some slow payments, I knew that I was getting paid, and I really believe that every business should go that route, so that you are able to, you might, yes, you have to, that's another payment that you have to make. It's a small percentage. But at the end of the day, that small percentage is what helps you grow and what helps you stay in the business.
Thank you. Now, Tim, obviously everyone now out there is like, oh my gosh, maybe I need to be working with Hilldun, or I need to be working with a factor, or how do I do this? So in terms of this, risk mitigation and understanding on your end, right, when it comes to meeting brands, right, when it comes to understanding who might be a good fit or how this process goes down, can you give us a little bit of color here in terms of your process and how you think about this?
I mean, when I look at brands, I'm looking to see what they really need. I mean, there's a lot of prepayment business out there. A lot of stores do prepay by credit card, and that is different. And that comes along with being able to offer a certain amount of stores credit on terms. And there are some advantages which I will go into later for doing that. But and then I understand that's what they need. But then there's a whole other array of financing options for brands, and that's what I look at also. So some clients come to us and they just want us to cover the risk, collect the receivable, make sure they get paid. And others come to us because they have a really serious need for financing to grow their brand. And maybe I can just elaborate on some of the things I see in the businesses, and as you develop a business, and this goes for retailers and wholesalers when it comes to their financing options. And what I get most is it's not a magic wand. It's not like all of a sudden you have financing available to you. You almost have to set up your business or have your business be able to be financed by creating assets to be able to borrow against. And as you all know, inventory is an asset, receivables are an asset, and there's other assets too. There's other cash flow within the business that can be assets, or just a good balance sheet, or personal collateral. But you have to understand that you can't just get a loan with nothing. So you have to give them something. So that could be could be creating receivables. But if you never create receivables, you never have a asset to borrow against. If you don't create inventory, you don't have an asset to borrow against. There's also, for retailers, there's cash flow that's created through their either online streams or through their bricks and mortar. That cash flow that's coming in is not a real asset, but today there are many options to borrow against that cash flow. So for a company to say is doing a lot of e-commerce sales, along with retail, along with wholesale, they have a direct revenue stream coming in on a continual basis. That revenue stream can create a line of credit for their business. And so there are some creative ways out there to finance, growing brands these days. And of course, banks, and most companies do try to go to a bank first. And in some cases, banks are the best option. But in a growing business, it's usually very difficult because banks have a huge amount of requirements. The reporting is way higher, and it's just difficult. So you have to look at all your options. And the last thing I'm going to say about that is that you can look at all your financing options out there, and you can meet with someone like me that can kind of spell it out for you and have you understand what all your options are. And then you look towards some kind of investment. Explore all your financing options first. It's way cheaper than equity. So that's my last thing I'm going to say about that.
You mentioned a lot of things in there.
Yeah.
So let's unpack some of those things. And let's start with the last thing you mentioned, which is investment, right? Investment and growth financing. I've personally been seeing over the last couple years just a huge swath of growth financing options that are available, which sometimes come with really high payouts, right, for the companies who are financing that growth, and are oftentimes very much needed when it comes to kind of covering the expenses between when you're receiving your next batch of goods, how it is you're keeping even operating lights on. I mean, there are so many different reasons why growth financing is important, and certainly I think a better opportunity than just taking investment and giving out equity. Roseann, in terms of your business and maintaining it to be a small operation, can you tell us a little bit about how you've considered or thought about things like taking outside investment for equity? How you've been able to kind of keep the reins on your business. I think it's become so glamorized right now. Everyone's fundraising and it sounds really sexy, but honestly, giving away your business is not that sexy.
Well, I think when it comes down to the finance and equity or borrowing, I personally, listen, and everyone's different, but for my business, I personally don't like to borrow if I don't have to. I like to make my own decisions. I don't want anyone telling me what to do. But there are going to be times where you need, you obviously need the funds to grow. But I'm a very kind of slow, you grow your business slow, make sure you have a solid base and a foundation, and you don't run to get to the other side. I am a true believer of the non-glamour side of business, which is, you got to chip away at it. And there are times where, yes, when you have to borrow and you feel nervous about it, but I like to quickly pay it off. It's the first thing that I do. I don't overspend. I'm not trying to grow further if I don't get, if I don't position myself to, sort of pay off the debt first. But I think there's too many entrepreneurs and companies out there that want to get there quickly. And you had touched upon the fact that, there's so much glamour out there. And I really believe that if you have a good product and you believe in what you're doing, and you can't just believe in it, it has to sell, right? So there has to be all this data, and what you're seeing is you have to be in a position where you're seeing the circular flow. And if you're seeing that you're spending, you're designing, you're putting yourself out there, and you're creating these amazing designs that you think are amazing, but it's not really selling and it's not moving, and your feedback and your data is telling you, I have overstock, I have inventory available, I'm not getting those reorders. You have to start to think, do I keep taking equity? Do I keep borrowing against, the company? Because that's what's going to put you in the place that you don't want to be at, right? So make sure that you look at your data and that you see the cash flow sort of coming in. You know, you might not be making tons of money in the beginning, but you have to see something coming in for you to put it back.
Thank you for that. And Tim, you know, what came out of what sparked my mind was, you know, there are so many different kinds of financial instruments that you guys offer, right? And so many different ways of being able to support a brand. And obviously, it feels like almost like a play on a dance, right? I mean, when do you take out some sort of loan? When do you have the opportunity to kind of engage with these different instruments? How are you then pivoting, watching things happen? I mean, I feel like being an entrepreneur is like, if nothing else, just a tremendous roller coaster ride. But in terms of understanding the different kinds of instruments that are available, right? When to leverage different aspects of that. Can you shed some light on that?
Sure. Like, I just had a conversation with somebody, just a certain brand, just starting out, just trying to really kind of figure out how you can leverage this business. And to sit down and talk to them about the supply chain. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what you're financing, is your supply chain. You're starting with where you're producing it, and it's ending where you're selling it, who you're selling it to, and then ultimately getting paid. That's the part of the business that you mainly do your financing for. Of course, you have your overhead, you have all these other things that have to be accounted for, but understanding how to finance that supply chain with different financing vehicles is really what you need to know. How you secure those vehicles is what you also need to know. So like financing that supply chain really could be really not even a financing option or not even a financing vehicle, but just developing really good relationships with your suppliers and getting stuff made and produced on terms. It's difficult, but I'm sure that's something that most brands get to at some point, or financing it through letters of credit or some other vehicle to get product made and out. And then once the goods are here, you need to finance it all the way through to the retailers and then paying. And that's when you use a factor or advances against receivables to be able to bring it all together. I know I'm talking very much big picture right now, but that is the idea. So it's either through production financing, which is financing supply chain, all the way through to like a factor or receivable financing, which is factoring the fact that you got to get paid by the stores and finance that whole flow. And then the other part of it is inventory. There's a lot of brands out there that bring in inventory and ship out inventory, and that inventory can sit for 90 days or plus while you actually sell it out. And then you could bring in, say, someone to do inventory financing, do a line of credit against inventory that would enable you to keep that inventory at whatever level you need to keep it. And that's also available. And if you're a retail store, you can finance through your cash flow, which is like either through your e-com, because most retailers have some kind of e-com platform, and also their brick and mortars. You have cash flow coming through, and you have inventory. So your inventory can be financed on a retail level or a wholesale level through inventory financing, or the e-com and the cash flow sales can also create lines of credit. So that's a pretty good, right?
That's a lot.
That's a lot, right? Okay.
That's a lot. You know, one of the things you mentioned is
Which one would you like?
Paula, would you join us, darling? Paula's going to jump on stage. She's head of sales at Barrick, and I think a fantastic addition to this conversation. So thank you for stepping away from the booth and from getting all those orders being written, because gosh, it feels like this trade show season has been, if nothing but a big boom for a lot of brands. Paula, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself just while we're kind of on this topic? And then, you know, I was going to pretty much just kind of open up the conversation to talking about supply chain and what's going on these days in terms of, you know, products being delivered and how we're all getting our orders out there. So Paula, please take it away. Please introduce yourself.
Hi guys, my name's Paula. I work at Barrick. I've been there for 3 years. I'm head of sales. I'm going to introduce our designer too, Jill, because we work hand in hand with each other. So if you guys need anything from Barrick, go to 1702.
Amazing. Thank you, Paula. So really the conversation, you were mentioning supply chain, and I think it's so just timely of this moment, right? I mean, everyone right now is wondering, when am I going to get my goods? You know, I think right now everyone's anticipating some potential strikes, West Coast ports coming up in July. I was just listening to a great interview with Ryan from Flexport, the CEO, and it was like, holy bananas. Like, we are going to be in a very interesting climate when it comes to getting goods received over the next, I'd say, 18 months or so, right? We are far from being out of the clear. This really touches everybody, but we can start with you, Paula. In terms of how, you're talking to buyers, and people are probably asking a little bit about what's going to happen with my deliveries. How are you communicating supply chain issues? Do you even have any supply chain issues? And what's the best way that you've been able to communicate and share that?
I mean, I think everyone definitely has supply chain issues. Everything is stuck at the ports, even if you're wherever you're ordering from, everything is stuck at the ports. For us, we've definitely ordered a lot earlier than we normally do. So we ordered maybe a season ahead of time to kind of mitigate the cancellations that we have. We haven't had actually any problems because we have found other boats to take. So that has definitely been a plus for us.
That's fantastic. And Roseann, in terms of how you guys are, and obviously your production is predominantly in the US, which is quite a tremendous feat. Can you share with us a little bit about how you're looking at mitigating some of these supply chain issues? And obviously, being domestic has a lot of advantages.
Right. Definitely being made in the USA, I thank my lucky stars. So it was definitely, there's supply chain issues everywhere, even if you're made in the US. So there's trim, there's buttons, there's fabric suppliers. There's a lot of things, you need in order to create an outfit or create these designs and styles. And sometimes there were delays where you were ready with one thing and then the other trim didn't show up on time. And as Barrick has stated, you have to prepare earlier. And as buyers, I would suggest you have to pivot, right? When we're in situations like this and you're listening to the news and it's going to be 18 months out, this is not going to be fixed overnight. 2022, there will be delays. You need to purchase earlier because that helps the entire cycle. When you purchase early, it will also help designers like us prepare everything early so that you get your goods on time. The demand will be high. There was a lot of demand last year. There's a lot of pent-up energy. People want to shop and spend. They're looking to buy. And when they're ready and your stores are empty, that's from not preparing early enough. And I think you can't really rely on all the designers to have goods when you're ready. But at the same time, being made in the US, Clara Sunwoo, we have a slightly different business model where we've been fortunate where we cut and sew everything before we even receive orders. But and I don't recommend this for, obviously startups. We've been around for 25 years, so I have a lot of data. I have a lot of customers who are loyal, so I sort of know, okay, this is my collection. I believe in it. This is how we're going to prepare. Not everybody is going to be in that stage. It took 25 years to get there, right? At some point you will, but it takes a while. But I think early preparation, buying, there's, even being made in the US, I've had to air things, and it's in the price points of airing things are insane because, here you're stuck. Everything's stuck at the vessels. You hear the news, there's 100 vessels at the ports just waiting. It's about plus 2 months just to get, goods. And, so you try your best, but at the same time, you can't air everything because it's so costly that's not possible to run a business that way. Diversifying, right? So if you are a retailer and you're purchasing, I would diversify, right, your goods. I would seek out made in the USA brands because your chances of receiving your goods on time will probably be higher. And this is not to just promote my line, but it's really true. Last year when a lot of the stores couldn't get their goods, we had everything shipped out and people were surprised. They were like, how are you getting the goods to us? And we're one of the few left in the US that was able to produce here.
That's really fantastic. I think and the cost of shipping, as you mentioned, is quite insane. And I think all of us here are wondering, how's that going to impact prices? How's that going to impact consumer sentiment? My gosh, with the least amount of planes now flying out of China, it's hard to even do air freight because you have less commercial planes that are coming out, right? So when we think about quick fixes, those quick fixes just are not quite as available, let alone the cost of shipping, which has now gone from, $2,000 a crate to now $20,000, which is a pretty insane amount to spend. And obviously consumers are like, oh my gosh, inflation, what's going on? But to bring this back to you, Tim, and to think about, how retailers are kind of looking at these supply chain issues and your experience kind of on the financing side of this, what's your experience been like in all the supply chain kind of shakeup?
Yeah, it's been rough. I mean, I get it all the time. Every time I speak to a new brand, I mean, that's one of their biggest concerns. One of their biggest issues they have to come get over is when are they going to get the goods? And they've been doing exactly a lot what Roseann said and Paula said, is that they're planning early. They have to make their buys earlier. They have to tell their factories to ship them earlier, and they're taking a little bit more chances. And you know what? This part of this is about taking risks. They're taking a little bit more risk. They're building a little bit more inventory than they had to. And on top of that, they're also, for a while there, I think it's kind of like settled down now, but for a while there, stores were needing 90 days to pay and change. And so now you had inventory rising, you had receivables rising, there was a lot of other cash flow issues that everybody had to get by for the last 12 months, which also put pressure on the financier to make additional loans and sit out there and just hope things got better. And many of our clients, we sat out there with very, 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 very large over advances meaning outside of any collateral that we had, just trying to get them through their period of time to where they could get the receivables sped up, they could get their inventory out the door, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I've seen a lot of that.
I mean, it's tough. Luckily, I think those brands today that have a both direct-to-consumer as well as a wholesale model, are really able to kind of tag team in terms of revenue channels. One of the things that I remember hearing just the other day was, Peloton, and if you guys heard this, right, but they stopped producing product, right? They said, we're not going to make anything anymore. We're going to sell through our existing inventory. And then not so long after that, 2,800 people were laid off because now they had all this, increased inventory. So I want to rope in Jill here in this conversation when it comes to product development and design. Obviously, something like a Peloton is, what we would consider to be evergreen. But in this, fashion era, consumers looking for a new product. Tim's mentioning you got to place those orders in advance. As a designer, right, how are you looking at developing collections just so far in advance with so much risk?
I'm sure Roseann will understand. It's been hard. It's very hard to project what everybody wants. We thought for a while everybody wanted loungewear. Now everybody wants to be dressy. So we're having to predict a lot of different avenues. I think we want to support everyone. We want to do a little bit of lounge. We want to do a little bit of dressy, a little bit of wear to work, go out afterwards. So we're having to project a lot of different avenues, I think, and that I think will help us diversify with all of you, and then give us a chance to grow different sections of what we're trying to do. But it's been hard because we have to project so far out right now. And like Paula was saying, we've already pre-ordered, March and April, and we had to put into consideration Chinese New Year and the workers not coming back and projecting, are they going to be there for the development later? We do ornate things, so are bead workers going to be there? Is the fabric going to be here on time? We have fabric coming from Italy or coming from China, all these different places, and we're having to organize a lot harder and a lot further out to make sure everything comes into play, like you were saying. It's hard to get all the pieces to make sure we ship on time. But it's a good struggle.
Yeah, of course.
So we're doing it.
That's fantastic. I think this goes to your earlier point, Roseann, about relationships. Everything kind of comes down to relationships. And it seems like it's not just relationships with stores, but we're also talking relationships with your manufacturers and sourcing. And every single aspect of your business model truly comes back down to relationships. That's really interesting. And so, Roseann, how are you approaching collection development? And also, what's interesting, and you mentioned this, Jill, was last year everyone's like scrambling to do loungewear and scrambling to fill holes in the market. Now things are shifting again. How on earth are you looking at, collection development? And furthermore, were there any surprises over the last year and a half with any of the collections that you produced?
So with Clara Sunwoo, one of our brand is really all about wrinkle-free, washable. We're a little dressy. The dressy part was hard because obviously during the pandemic, it sort of no one was going anywhere. We're also resort. People weren't traveling, right? But I kept to the wrinkle-free and the washable was really important. That was part of our brand. But we were not loungewear. So one of the things, and with our brand, I always stayed true to what I am good at. And I think you have to know what you're good at. You can't be everything. So rather than spreading myself thin, I would just, again, with my data, hey, let's maybe produce more of the washable, wrinkle-free, and the everyday wear that may not have all the shimmers and glitters and all of that and the beads, but just tone that part down and just kind of, mix our bag of marbles a different way. That's what we were doing. But I stayed true to what I do, meaning all of a sudden did not pivot and start making sweatpants because that's not who I am. We don't do that. But I think that our customers, at the end, it really paid off because our customers were not confused. They knew what Clara Sunwoo was about. They knew that they're going to get their quality, they're going to get their washable, wrinkle-free, and it was everyday wear, but a little dressier than your typical sweatpants. But I think that the consumer, when they talk, there's a lot of media talk, there's a lot of fashion talk about how everybody's into loungewear. Everyone is not into loungewear. Everyone is not. The population has all different women, and it's really, if you find your niche, you know who your customers are, you're going to speak to your customer, right? And I think that I think staying true to what you are good at is what's going to keep you alive.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And but what if you're a small brand and you're trying to figure out, what am I good at? And maybe you started your brand, around the pandemic, right? It feels like there are just so many different things we could cling on to, right? And say, well, maybe I should go in this direction or that direction, or, how do you balance your own aesthetic as a designer and as a brand versus almost what the market is looking for, right? You're lucky. You've got some great years in business. A lot of people don't.
My answer to that would be yes, and my heart goes out for you if you started during the pandemic because it is one of the most difficult times to start a business. But I think there's always opportunity. And no matter how difficult the situation, there's opportunity if you really stay true to what you know how to do. My best advice is if you're starting out, keep it timeless. Keep it a little more simple. Design in ways where it's part of who you are, but ask yourself, can I wear this, whatever I'm designing and investing in, right? These are your assets. Will I be able to sell this in a year, in 2 years? Because if the answer is no, because it's so trendy and it's so in right now, you shouldn't be doing that. And I think that's how you pivot. If you keep it timeless and you build longevity, because right now it's a place where things are changing quickly. You just never know which way things are going to go. And I think that's really my best advice to you if you're new.
Awesome.
And just to comment on that, I mean, I know back in 2008 when the economy basically crashed and we lost 30%, 35% of retailers out there. We lost many brands. It was a very, very difficult time. But however, coming out of that, all the new brands that started during that time became incredible designers. And one of the reasons that they were able to be successful is because, one, they didn't have to suffer through that time. They started during that time, so they already knew their overhead had to be low. They already knew they had to watch their inventory positions. They didn't have to get into a hole during that bad time. And guess what? This is the same type of experience. the designers that had to go through this time, many of them ended up in a hole and in a very difficult situation coming out of it. The ones that kind of got started during this time, it's like the same idea. They had to really focus on their product, and they had to focus on their overhead. They had to focus on these things where sometimes these things are taken for granted when times are so good. When times are bad, they have a little bit different focus.
I love that. So Tim, I do want to ask you, what's so fantastic about having these guys up here is just really their different paths to success, right? And kind of different ways of building business. In your experience, right, you've seen so many different kinds of businesses be built, right? And different paths to success. And obviously in these uncertain times, or things that are, maybe it is certain, I mean, gosh, retail will always be there. So we're all very lucky to be in this industry because this ain't going anywhere. But in terms of kind of your visibility on the right kind of mix of maybe revenue streams, or how the best brands out there are kind of looking at leveraging financing, can you give us some ideas here on what you're seeing as the right mix here to maybe success or profitability?
Interesting. I mean, I have this question presented to me a lot, and I have to say, I mean, it really does always start with the product. And then you take that product and you go through a variety of different revenue streams, which can be the omni-channel, which is, the e-com, the retail, the brick and mortar, the wholesale, trying to develop that either one at a time or all three or two out of three at one time creates revenue. I've seen more brands survive in business because they had some revenue stream while they built what they loved. So if that revenue stream comes from one of those avenues, great. If it comes from all their side projects they're doing, great. There's got to be a revenue stream behind the brand in order to create it. Give time for your product to get out there and to do well in a vast array of retail stores. So, I mean, I know it's kind of a quick answer, but it really is. Almost every brand I ever look at, started with their product, it went to revenue stream, and then it went to their supply chain. And how they put that all together is what created success.
Thank you. So I want to flip it back to you guys in terms of revenue streams and business modeling, right? And kind of looking at growth. I mean, it's a crazy year. Supply chain mayhem. We're all trying to look at our crystal balls here in terms of not just leveraging great relationships with folks like Tim at Hilldun, but all sorts of relationships that we have, right? So as you guys are kind of looking to revenue stream business building, mitigating risk as we're going into 2022, let's crystal ball this a little bit. Paula, what are you kind of seeing as you're approaching this year and as you're looking at kind of the mix of revenue streams and what you think might be the right success mix for you guys?
I think I'm going to have to pass this one on to Jill.
Okay.
I'm struggling with this one too. I have to agree with you. You have to have some little bit of outside projects sometimes. We've been in business for 45 years. So, and the product that we have here is, our main Barrick line. But to make sure that we have this continuing, we want to stay in that lane and create that product that we love. But to keep the revenue going with Hilldun and growth, we have to have some outside projects, whether it be private label, working with sales with Paula. She developed some other things, just projects that we have to keep building upon. That's our crystal ball, I think, right? We have to, she'll come and say, okay, what do you think can we take this jacket but make something different? I could sell it to someone else. But we continue to have the growth of the Barrick line. So
I love that.
Well, I also think expanding your customer base too, because we're hitting kind of like a plateau in our customers. So we want to see what else is out there because we've been around for 40 years. So we're kind of trying a different sales approach to where we're sending pick boxes so they can see things in person, or we're calling and say, hey, let's just set up an appointment virtually just so we can meet and say, hey. So I think it's really just thinking outside of the box for us too, and not staying in our comfort zone so we can get a little uncomfortable to really feel the success of all of the stuff that we're doing.
I love that. I love mentioning special projects, private label. I mean, sometimes I think we're too afraid to be like, hey, it takes lots of different ways to be able to keep business going. It's not just always, this is the collection and this is it, right? We have to bring some level of innovation to product development, obviously giving customers what they need, relying on those relationships. Roseann, what's your experience been like?
So I think the key word relationship for me really kind of just speaks to me, because during our hardest times when stores were not jumping to buy and, everyone was a little bit more conservative about their purchases before there was more demand, we spent a lot of time calling buyers, making virtual appointments, and really just to keep in touch and have the brand be out there. In the past, there's very little time to do these things, but I felt like that was an investment on our end to really, let the customers know we care, we're here for you. You don't necessarily have to buy today, but we want you to know that we're here when you need us, and when you're ready, think about, just sort of make sure you don't forget us. And that time that we put in was, it's paying off, and sometimes, again, it goes back to slow growth, right? It's all about, you got to put in the work. If you want to get your revenue, you got to put in the work, and not everything is glamorous in the fashion industry. We talk about omni-channel, so revenue streams coming from different places, whether it be, so one of the things that we did is in the past, when we're always kind of, during the good times, pre-pandemic, we didn't have a lot of time to do PR. And so we focused we held on to all of our employees, and instead of letting go or furloughing everyone, we said, hey, I know your role is normally sales, or I know your role is normally, in a different department, but we could build our social media better. I think it could be a lot stronger. Why don't we focus on our social media? Why don't we reach out to Oprah and let her know that we're here? And guess what? We got on Oprah's list this year. Woo! Woo! Right? But those are the things that you got to start to think outside the box, because whenever you have time, entrepreneurs never have time, right? Never. But when you have the time, because you're forced to now have some time, you start to think outside of the box and focus on these other things that maybe you were sort of putting to the side, before. So I learned my lesson too. I said, wow, we tried these different things, and now here we are. And again, it's a continuing struggle. You're constantly learning, and you're constantly figuring out what your revenue angles are. And through social media, you have a bigger following. You obviously have new customers that never knew about your line before. But I think omni-channel means to me many different. It's not just having a brick and mortar store. It's not just having your e-com or your wholesale. It could be a lot of different things. When you're a retailer, you can work on your social media, build your customer base, build your loyalty, have a message, keep in touch with them.
Amazing. Thank you for that. Guys, I know everyone here is eager to get back to their booths now that they've all plugged in where they are at, and everyone's
1524.
Everyone's rushing to go write orders. Before we close out, I just want to go around with the mic and kind of give everyone an opportunity to have one word that's kind of what their focus is for this year. And I think that could be a nice way to close it out. And then obviously, guys, afterwards, if you guys want to have questions, meet them at their booths, because they're going to be busy writing orders. But let's start with you, Tim. What's a good kind of word for you this year when you look at retail, and what's ahead for us?
Well, I mean, we have over 500 active clients, and I gotta say, the numbers have never been better. It's almost hard to say that, and really understand why. But orders are up, sales are up. I think everybody feels really good about the next 6 months, and I think it's going to continue that way, or at least we are really, really hoping. So I think it's been really good through this, and most brands have done really well coming out of this. So I have high hopes, and I really like this new WWIN show. I think it's pretty cool. I mean, this room is really nice. I mean, I got to tell you, coming out of the Rio, this is a big improvement.
Roseann, what's your word for the year? What's the vibe?
This is going to sound strange, but I'm going to say breathe. Okay, there's going to be a lot of moments where you need to just breathe. I don't know where it's going. I'm going to stay positive. I think there's demand out there. I think that, again, there's opportunity out there. So, when you're making the choices, you're going to struggle sometimes. You're going to be real happy sometimes. But whatever you do, breathe, and it'll be okay.
Awesome. Paula.
I'm going to go with push, because you got to push yourself outside your comfort zone, and you really just got to go for it. If you believe in something, then go for it 100% and leave it all out there, because then you don't have any regrets after that.
Amazing. Jill, take us home.
I think I'm going to go with both, breathe and push, and
Hey.
probably persevere. We have to get through it, and we have to just keep being the little Energizer bunny and go, and keep making it happen.
Amazing. Thank you. And I'd say my word for this year is, and I'm going to just rip off of Roseann's, which is relationships. I think that was kind of the main thing that I really got out of this conversation is, it's not just relationships when it comes to selling something, but it's relationships with everybody. And if anything has shown us in this past few years of the pandemic, we will only get through it with each other. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. Please feel free to stop by their booths to write some juicy orders, or come talk to Tim and hang out with me. Thank you.
Thank you.